trust in the mighty power of God. Well, today I want to do a little exercise. This requires audience participation, and that's what we have the easels coming up here for. My stage crew is helping out with. I needed a stage crew this morning. I want to talk about the do's and don'ts, or rather, we're going to start with the don'ts and then go to the do's. And what I want to talk about this morning are those things that we do have control over and those things we don't have control over. And a lot of us can probably identify with this, so let's start with the don'ts. And this is where you can help me out. So what are the things we don't have control over? And if you have an answer, just kind of pop your hand up and in the back. Other people. Wow, well, that sums it all up, doesn't it? All right. What about other people do we not have control? Say somebody else. Yeah. How they drive. Did you hear my sermon this morning already? No, okay. What else? I see a hand back here. No, you're just doing your hair. Okay. All right. Yes. What they say, right. So what other people, their drive, what they say. Who has got another one? Dave. Behavior. Who's got another one? Their beliefs. I heard body language. How they think. I'm just going to keep doing this. To hear actions. Right. All right, I think I got room for one more. Feelings. Somebody else's feelings, right? We have no control over that. If you've been married, you know that. So, we want one more? Weather, yeah. Weather, like typhoons, but yeah. So our weather. So these are things we cannot control. We have no control over those things. So here's the question. What do we have control over? What do we have control over? Yes. Ourselves, right. Man, you guys are smart. And what particularly about ourselves? How we react. Behavior, our behavior, right. Our beliefs. Yeah. All right. Very good. I filled up both lists. That's great. So, have you ever noticed that a lot of our anger is on this side of the... how often do we get angry about what other people do? And that's what frustrates us and makes us angry. And it's really we get angry about stuff we have, what? No control over, right? Because we're all control freaks. Can I get amen this morning? Can I get a witness? All right, yeah, good, thanks. We're all control freaks. We all want to be in control. And when we're not in control, we get frustrated, we get angry. And there are things we cannot, these are out of our control. This over here, our reaction, our behavior, how we respond to this over here is in our control. So what do you do with this stuff? You want to know what to do with it? I'm going to show you what to do with it. There's nothing you can do about it, right? It's yours, you can keep it. But don't hold on to it and stuff it inside. We'll talk about that later when you get older, okay. So, we can't control that stuff. So, what James is saying to us this morning in James chapter 1 is that we do have some say, we do have control over our response. And sometimes in our response, it's human anger. It's human frustration. We're going to unpack that a little bit this morning. One of the things, though, I do want to identify is that what James is talking about is what he calls human anger. That means the human side of us that kicks in and takes over sometimes and expresses itself in good way, in not so good ways. That's what he's talking about. There is a part of anger, and because we all get angry, and there's times when life is not fair, and we get upset about it, and we get angry about it, and that's what we might call this holy discontent or righteous indignation that might lead us to make a difference in the world around us or change, but we do it with this side. Does that make sense? And so we do it in a way that's productive and helpful to society or to the relationship or to the situation. And so anger is also sometimes pain, and pain is an identifier that something's wrong. So that's the good part of it. But what we're talking about in James is really the bad part of it, the harshness of it, the human side of it, when we give expression to it and do things and say things that we regret or we maybe shouldn't have done. So he's talking about human anger and the human expression of anger. And so he says in James 1:19 and 20, he says, "You must understand this, my beloved. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. For your anger does not produce God's righteousness." A lot of time we have to remember that part is what James is saying, and he's giving us some wisdom here. And what he's saying is that when we're angry and we give expression to our human anger, we're actually not reflecting God. We're not reflecting God's righteousness. We're not reflecting the kind of God that God calls us to follow, that Christ calls us to follow. And so we're not reflecting that. He actually goes on and he mentions a little bit about the tongue in verse 26. He says, "If any of you think they are religious and do not bridle their tongues, but deceive their hearts, their religion is worthless." Now, we're going to talk more about our words next week in part 2. But this morning, I want us to understand what James is also saying is that when we're angry, we're actually deceiving ourselves. We're actually deceiving our hearts. When we're giving vent to our anger, when we're not keeping a tight rein on our words and our anger, what we're doing is we're actually deceiving ourselves. And we're going to unpack what happens and how we deceive ourselves in our anger, because it's really about our understanding of reality. And I'll unpack that, and I'll use myself as an illustration. So one of the things we need to undo as we look at this, we have to realize what's going on inside the human brain. And psychologists and neuroscience have said that we have two parts of our brain. There's the upper brain and the lower brain. The section, this stuff up top, and then this stuff back here down low. And a lot of animals have lower brains, but they don't have the upper brains. We as human beings have upper brains, and that's what gives us the ability to reflect on our actions. And this upper brain is responsible for reconciliation, for problem solving, for empathy, for planning, for dreaming, for being creative. This is all the good stuff we talk about. This is like our upper brain. When we're in our upper brain, we're being our best. We're at our best. When we're in our lower brain and functioning out of our lower brain, what we're doing is we're doing what the animal kingdom does, and we're falling into the response of fight, flight, or freeze. So if we're being attacked by a bear or a lion, there's a physical attack coming to us. Our brains are wired to either fight, flight, or freeze. So if we can't run away, we'll probably go into fight. We're going to try and survive. So we're going to go into mode to fight, and we're going to fight and try and survive. If we can get away from the attack of the bear, then we're going to run as fast as we can away from that, because that's the way we're wired in our lower brains. Or we do what some animals do, like the possum, and that is we just free. They keel over, they play dead, And doesn't this happen when we feel personally attacked by somebody, or there's something out of our control? We can go into lower brain mode, and part of our anger sometimes is some people respond in anger, they want to fight it out, right? And we're all different in our response, because when we get angry, what do we want to do? I'm going to let them have it, right? Let's go. And that's part of that fight response that may be taking over in us, that lower brain response. The other thing some of us do is we're conflict avoidant. We're the runners away. We run away from conflict. We avoid conflict. We get away from it. We get out of it. We go around it, and so we make sure we don't engage it. So we're fleeing, and that response is to flee. And then the last response is the freeze response, which is just where we just shut down altogether. We just withdraw. We just go inside of ourselves, and we just totally just try and, push the world away from us. We just shut down and we freeze. And so those responses are actually out of the lower brain. And so what James is saying is, how do we get into our upper brain? How do we move out of that human response, that fight, flight, or freeze response, and move up into our higher brain, to rise above that situation? That's a phrase I use with myself all the time. I'm like, Matt, you've got to rise above this. Which what I'm saying to myself is, Matt, you got to get into your upper brain on this. You can't go low brain here. You got to get in the upper brain. I'll give you an example of a time I got in my lower brain. I was actually out on my bike, and I was riding my bike on 99, and it was a Friday afternoon. My day off is on Friday, and I'm out riding. It's rush hour time. I haven't had lunch. I had a stressful week. The other thing that happens to us when stress hormones are released in our brain and in our system, we actually tend to go lower brain. Have you ever noticed when you're stressed, you tend to go lower brain rather than in your best place? And so that's going on. I haven't eaten. I'm at the end of my ride, a 45-mile bike ride. I don't do that now, but that's what I was doing back then. And 45-mile bike ride, so I'm tired. I'm a little grumpy, and I'm pedaling away. And now I'm on 99, and there's traffic backed up all along 99, stop-and-go traffic, and I'm on the shoulder, and there's a full wide shoulder where I'm at. So a full wide shoulder means there's not a little room, there's a lot of room. And I'm all the way to the right of the shoulder, as far away from the traffic as I can be, bike safety. And I'm out there and I'm pedaling away. I'm within 2 miles of my house heading home. Glad to get home, get something to eat, get something to drink. And a person decides they don't want to wait in traffic anymore. What do we say about drive? We have drive up here on our list, right? So they come out onto the shoulder and start to fly up the shoulder past all the other traffic, and then they cut in farther up ahead. But in so doing that, they come very close to almost hitting me, narrowly almost hitting Matt on his bike. By the way, the law is a minimum of 3 feet, just to let you all know. That if you see a biker, you're supposed to leave at least 3 feet between the biker and your car. A lot of people don't know that, so that's why I'm sharing that as a biker. So, just a little word. But this was not 3 feet. This was like 3 inches from my handlebar kind of thing. And it made me kind of swerve a little bit, and it scared the, out of. And so I sit there, and that happened. And the other thing is, as I looked over as they're going by, they're texting. So they're not even paying attention to didn't even pay attention to me being there. So they're texting. This is before the laws changed, so they weren't doing anything illegal. But and I saw him go in, I saw him cut it back in traffic, and the lower brain took over. And I went into fight mode. That's what I did. Stop and go traffic versus a guy who could probably do 25 miles an hour on his bike, I can catch him. So I start cranking as hard as I can. And I catch up to them because they're stopped up in traffic. And I catch up to them, and it's summertime, so they got their windows down, and they're still on their phone. And I just yell at them. And I say, "You almost killed me. You need to watch where you're going, da, 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 da." I didn't use any bad words, but I was yelling. I was in fight mode. I was like, "You threatened my life." See, that's what happened, right? And then I rode away. I felt pretty good for about a minute. Then you know what the next thought was? Man, I hope nobody from church was there. That's exactly what I thought. Like, oh no. Because what happens is, I can just imagine the person right behind that person. Because what anger does, it blinds us. We're so narrowly focused on what's going on. We're blind to what else is going on. The other thing we're blind to, and why we deceive ourselves, is anger blinds us to reality. We're not thinking reality. We're thinking in the moment. And so we're not able to unpack reality. And it's really what we see as our reality, not what maybe reality really is. I know that's redundant. But think about that. That's how anger deceives ourselves. Because here's the thing. How many people here can read somebody else's mind? Nobody. How many people here can discern somebody else's heart or the motives or intent of their heart? Nobody. We can't do that. And so that's when we have a lack of understanding, so what happens when we have a lack of understanding is we fill in the gaps in our mind. So when there's no understanding, if I don't understand their intent or why they did that, so let's go back to the car example, right? I have no idea. Maybe they had just found out, and maybe they just got a text that said, your husband's dying. You need to get home right away. I don't know. If that had been the case, that changes the context. That changes the situation, doesn't it? But I don't know that. I don't know the intent of their hearts. I don't know what they're thinking. And so, but what I do in my mind And in my anger is I fill in the gaps. Because that's what our minds do. And I fill it up with suspicion, and I think the worst in the other person. I think their intent is wrong. I think their behavior is wrong. See what I'm saying? But I don't really know that for sure. Because I didn't stop and ask a question. I didn't stop and say, did you see me back there? Did you know you almost killed me? And that's what James is encouraging us to do. He says, be quick to listen. That if we would take that just practical advice to just be quick to listen. If we would just be quick to listen and stop and try and get at the reality of what's going on rather than our perception of reality and filling in all the blanks with our assumptions and false assumptions and misconceptions, then we might actually figure out what's really going on. But we have to stop and be quick to listen. And listening is a very important thing. It's a very important skill. And it helps us actually resolve conflict when we listen. Because when we're in anger mode, what are we not doing? We're not listening. We're thinking about the next way I can attack the other person or the next way I'm going to defend my own self in that argument or whatever's going on. And what I'm not doing is I'm not listening. I'm not really listening. I might stop and say, and get a response, but I'm not really listening. Anybody know what I'm talking about? It's possible to hear and not listen. That's what we get into. I see a lot of spouses shaking their head at this moment. So that's what was going on on the bike incident. I was not listening. I was just caught up in lower brain activity. And so we're not listening. The other thing James says is be slow to speak. Quick to listen, slow to speak. Now, Mama said, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all, right? I'm not 100% in agreement with that. Because what I'm doing is maybe I'm stuffing it rather than really finding out what the reality is. Does that make sense? So I'm just holding on to it. Instead of really asking some good questions that might actually help me understand what's going on and might resolve my anger or might resolve the situation. So I think it is part of listening is asking good questions is what I'm saying. So when we slow down and listen and we're slow to speak, we might want to ask questions to help us listen or slow down what we want to say and say, I need to understand this person's perspective. To slow down enough to do that, to ask some good questions. Now, I'm going to give you some examples of bad questions. These are bad questions, and I've heard them, not personally, but I've heard them. So these are not coming out of my own experience. But here's one question. The first question is what's called a rhetorical question. Rhetorical question means I really don't want an answer. I just want to give you my opinion, but I'm going to make it sound like I'm asking a question. Which the first one is, why are you such a jerk? That's a rhetorical question, right? I'm trying to tell you you're a jerk without telling you you're a jerk. I'm really actually being deceptive in the question. So the next question is an either-or question. A lot of times we ask either-or, either this or either that, kind of ultimatum type question. This one I just concocted. I said, do you or did you not call me a jerk? And that's really done in anger. Also, how the tone is also important. And then the last one is what I call a no-win question. There are questions people ask us that really you're not going to win no matter which way you answer them. That's a no-win question. You are either a jerk or you're just a pain in the neck. Which is it? So again, no-win. You're in a no-win situation right there, right? You're not going to be able to answer that question in any good manner. And there are other questions like that put us in no-win situations in our answers. So those aren't helpful questions. Those questions don't help us get at reality or what's going on in the other person's heart or in the other person's mind. Here are some good questions, and they all begin with the same word, and that is what? Because this leads to an investigation of reality for them and for us. And so when we're wanting to listen, we're really trying to investigate what's really going on and really understand what's going on. So starting a question with what kind of helps deflate some of that rather than why. You could also ask the question, did I do something, or to kind of start to investigate if someone's angry with us. We could, if you're not aware of it, but you're sensing they may have something going on, you might just ask them, did I do something? Is everything okay? That might be an investigative question. Other ones are, what led you to think that? That's investigative. That's trying to get understanding from what's going on. What happened to make you feel that way? Again, what am I trying to unpack? The person's heart. So the first one's about what the person is thinking, what's going on in their mind. The next one is about what's going on in your heart. How are you feeling about this? Again, because I can't read minds and I can't discern hearts. So I have to ask questions to understand. And then the other thing that's is actually an act of service kind of oriented question is, what can I do differently to help? So if there's something going on, what can I do differently? How can I help this situation? How can I resolve it? And that's an investigation into what can we do differently? How can we solve this problem? And it's a question that we have to be willing to step outside of ourselves on. Here's the thing. What we're really asking people to do, what we're really doing, is we're saying that other person or that other person's belief or that other person, whatever they're going on in them, may be just as valid as what's going on inside of me. And so when I investigate it and listen for it, I'm actually saying you're important. You may have a valid point of view that I'm not aware of. And to be willing to listen is really to say to that person, I'm not more important than you and you're not more important than me. But if we'll sit down together and investigate the reality together, we might be able to do something about it. And that's the righteousness that God calls us to be our best selves. And we have to get out of our lower brains and into our upper brains to do that. Great example of this, and I'll wrap up with this example. How many people saw the movie We Were Soldiers back? Mel Gibson was the commanding officer, and he took a group of American soldiers. Yeah, I see many people have seen this. And they took a group of American soldiers into the Ladrang Valley. This was the first major battle of the Vietnam War. They made a movie about it. Hal Moore was the commanding officer, and he wrote a book called We Were Soldiers once, or just We Were Soldiers, and they made the movie out of it, and it was basically about the Battle of Ladrang Valley. And the Americans went in to the valley. They set up their headquarters there in the valley to fight the North Vietnamese army, which was in the hills and the mountains. And what they didn't know is they were severely outnumbered. I think there were about 4,000 North Vietnamese troops hiding up in the hills, and they had significantly less than that there in the valley. And so they went in there, and the movie is all about the battle. This was the real major, this was like the one battle. Everything else up to that time had been skirmishes in the Vietnam War, and this was like the official first battle of the Vietnam War. And the movie's all about that. What a lot of people don't know is that Hal Moore also wrote another book as a follow-up to that. And the book is called We Are Soldiers Still. But in that book, it's a book about him going back to the Ladrang Valley 30 to 40 years later. And what he did was he petitioned the North Vietnamese government to actually go back and visit the valley again where this battle took place. It took him 2 years to get permission from the North Vietnamese government to return to Vietnam and to go to the valley. Here's the other thing he did. He invited the commanding officers of the North Vietnamese army that were in those mountains to come join him. He proposed an invitation to come meet with him in the valley. Now, that's an act, that takes a lot of courage sometimes to go to the person that was your enemy and say, let's get together, let's talk about this. And what he did is he did that. He threw out the first olive branch. And when he did that, they met together, got permission to go with them. And so if you can imagine, this is actually the picture you see on the screen, is a picture of both the Americans and the North Vietnamese officers from that battle in the Ladrang Valley. I think that's actually near where the headquarters was set up, the American headquarters was set up in the valley. And they camped there overnight, and they stayed together, they camped together. And they shared their stories of the battle. And when they shared their story and their perspectives with each other, they gained understanding into what was going on. And they began to have a new appreciation for one another. And they began to understand what each other as enemies were thinking. And they began to understand the heart and that each of them wanted the same things. And these enemies became friends because they were willing to sit down in the valley and share their stories with one another. And all of them came to one singular conclusion. You want to know what that conclusion was? What a waste. Both sides came to the conclusion, what a waste. What a waste of time. What a waste of human life. What a waste of energy. What were we fighting about? What difference did it make? It was a waste. And the only reason they came to that conclusion was they were willing to sit down and look back at what had happened. And I got this image that one day we're all going to sit down in God's heavenly valley and we're going to camp out and we're going to share stories about life. And all those moments that we were angry, all those moments we were frustrated, all those moments we were mad at each other, you know what conclusion I think we're going to come to? What a waste. I wasted a lot of time being mad. I wasted a lot of time being angry. I wasted a lot of time investing in things that weren't going to bring me joy or give me a better life. I wasted a lot of my life. And God says, Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Amen.